Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Pinnacle Stack. It's myself, B-Dog, and Hawker, and today we've got a very special guest. It's Mauisnake. Maui, obviously, you're covering a lot of the Pro League stuff, so we're going to get your insight. But I guess first off, before we jump into everything, how are you doing, and how's everything going?
I'm doing great. I've been just co-streaming everything going on at ESL Pro League on my Twitch channel, and I've really had a great time enjoying the follies of teams like NIP, and I've been pretty pleasantly surprised by teams like Movistar. So at least there's some surprises because I think the worst thing that can happen in the ESL Pro League group is for everything to go completely as expected, and then you ask yourself at the end of it, why did I even watch this? I knew what was going to happen. And that didn't happen in Group A.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Hawk, obviously, you've been covering some of it on the B stream, but kind of outside of casting and bits like that. What have you been up to? I know you went on holiday recently. How was that?
Oh yeah, exciting times. I went to Budapest, good fun. Yeah, Budapest was great actually. I really enjoyed it. It's also just so cheap, so you're always a happy man. Like you can go to a really nice restaurant and be like, "Oh, that costs about what it costs in London. Cool, that's nice." Yeah. Other than that, just chilling. Counter Strike 2, playing a little bit,
Yeah.
and just having a good time in general. B dog, it's good times.
Lovely stuff. Have you guys been able to play much of CS2 since the open beta came out? Like, I haven't had the chance because I've been in Romania, but is it looking good? Is it feeling better than kind of the old versions that we had?
I think the latest update yesterday actually made a couple of things in the game feel better, like pressing E on guns. I still feel like that's a little bit difficult, but I actually have been playing quite a bit of CS2. I've been playing more CS2 than I've played CSGO maybe this whole year. I'm not gonna lie,
Okay.
which is a good thing. I think this is what Valve want us to do, and because I've been playing on the North American servers, I can say that it is a better experience than CS:GO matchmaking North America, which was riddled with cheaters. And I have yet to run into a blatant cheater, at least in my CS2 games. So hopefully that is actually going to hold up. I hope that the paid cheaters aren't going to just start coming in droves as soon as it's completely open for everybody.
Yeah, I just find it really hard because, like, I think we're all just so used to CS:GO that any change is really confusing to figure out whether something feels genuinely wrong or if it just feels different. Because, like, the movement is the big one for me, where to me, I still feel super floaty when I'm moving about. Like, I don't feel like Counter Strife's as quick. I don't know if that's just like a difference in the game or if that's something that's intended. I think it's like we're going to need a bit of time with it before knowing everything. I feel like is how I feel right now.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to remember is that, like, this is an open beta, right? Things are going to change. They're constantly going to get feedback and data, and they're going to keep improving the game. I've seen some people kind of have their reservations about it, which is going to be expected because obviously we are changing the dynamic, we're changing the source engine, but I haven't had any chance to really play it with like the new MR12, and I think that's something that is obviously quite a catalyst for conversation. And we are going to move on, but I'm just nosy, so I want to kind of get your opinions on MR12 and kind of how that is playing out in CS2. Like, has it felt more refreshing, or is it one of those things where we're kind of going back in the past a little bit, but we really want MR15 back in the conversation?
I'll say that with the matchmaking experience, it is nice to play MR12. I've probably only had a single close game that I've played, and it still felt pretty tense once it got to round 22, 23, 24. So I don't think that because it's not MR30, it's like I needed more build up necessarily because it's a matchmaking game. I'll say that I was also a bit of a short game abuser where by the tail end of CSGO's matchmaking experience for me, I was definitely playing probably 80% short games, 20% longies. And that's kind of it's kind of actually hit a nice middle ground for me, the MR12, where still feel the satisfaction of a game and the fact that there are some ups and downs with economy. Whereas with short games, I was force buying every round. I'm not gonna lie, I was one of those
Yeah.
people. And in these MR12 games, I actually should be a little bit more reasonable because I don't want to be just griefing my team. So I think MR12 has been pretty good. That's like a completely different conversation, though, whether or not it's going to be feeling as great when I'm watching a professional tier one game, though.
Yeah, I feel like the big thing for tier one is just going to be like it does feel like the economy could be really brutal, especially if you or even if right now with the economy, like you win the first pistol, then you lose the follow up, you get so screwed on your economy early. Like that could be really bad. I'd have been really interested if they just kind of decreased everything, including like round times, smoke times, molly times by like 20%. I'd be interested to see like how that would have played and just kept MR15 because I do still want like the variation of strategies and especially storytelling for Pro CS, having like different rounds. I don't want the economy to be constant full buys. I don't want it to feel like the economy is a massive factor on deciding the game. So I'd have been interested to see how that could have gone. But all in all, like, listen, the games do need to be a bit shorter, in my opinion. So I'm not that fussed. I think it's probably a step towards the right direction. And it also could actually be really interesting to see teams try and adjust to this because it's going to make every round feel like a lot more important. So instead of a breadth of strategies, maybe you have to really hone in and like specifically make sure every round you run has as few mistakes as possible. So maybe we actually just see a sort of different style of Pro CS in the future. Who knows?
Okay. And the very last one, just building on your points then. Do you reckon we'd ever have tournaments that went through a phase where some of them were just MR12 and some of them could be MR15? Like could there ever be a variation in the CS calendar? Or because Valve have made this rule in and they've gone, okay, well the majors are on MR12, is everyone just gonna hard reset into this MR12? Or do you reckon there'll actually be like those tournaments where if they're a little bit, I guess, longer? For example, I think Pro League's a really good example, like where you could have MR12 all the way through and for it to be fine. But maybe something like Cologne playoffs, would that ever be MR15 in the future?
I wouldn't expect a TO to go against what Valve does. I do think, what was I going to say? I think that because Valve are laying down the hammer on that, I don't think it's going to really change. I do think what's really curious though with MR12 is if we're going to actually keep using BO1s in any sense. That to
Mm.
me is a question that I have where, because for example, the first beginning of the Swift stage in both the Challenger stage and the Legend stage of the Major, I feel like it's totally not viable anymore. If you're going to use BO1 MR12s, I feel like you should pretty much from the get go start with BO3s. And so I don't know if necessarily another TO is going to go against the grain and start trying to go back to MR15 or anything like that. But I do think that, for example, Cologne, I don't know how they would do their play-in because the play-in starts with BO1s there, and at Katowice's play-ins, the first matches are all BO1s. So maybe I would say, but I would doubt it. I would doubt anybody's going to go away from MR12s.
Yeah, unless there's like some sort of fun tournament or some weird format, and then you can kind of do whatever you want. But I think if you're going for a serious tournament, you probably keep it with whatever Valve is doing. Yeah, I just think that the other interesting thing, I guess, around MR12 is I know this seems small, but to me it's kind of a decently big thing. Is like, so you know how Twitter changed to X, and it was really dumb because everyone knows about tweets and Twitter, and that branding is crazy. There's part of me that with MR15, you have terms like a 30 bomb. It's kind of not going to be a thing anymore because it's going to be so hard to get a 30 bomb. And that was like a really nice round number to tell if someone had an incredible game, or even like a 16-0. In my head, I'm like, oh, that's crazy when that happens. Is like a 12-30-0. Is that going to feel as cool? I guess maybe, but it's hard for my head to change to that. So I think we'll have to wait and see once we get used to it how the sort of terminology feels, I guess.
Yeah, maybe a bit less rare to have 13 zeros compared to 16 zeros and kind of hold those in a higher regard. All right, so our opinions are playing it, it's pretty decent, but obviously we need to know the landscape and we won't know until the game's fully released to see how it really impacts tier one and that professional landscape. All right, cool. So obviously with that news out the way, we're going to move forward onto some of these events. I guess the big talking point for me is that I was at IESF for the last 2 weeks in Romania, in Yash. It was beautiful. I just want to talk about just the tournament itself and the format for those that are a little bit unfamiliar, because it's basically the equivalent of a World Cup. you've got nations competing from all over the world. They bring 5 representatives to kind of compete, and there's also the women's CS:GO tournament that was over there. Team Netherlands won that one. It looked really dominant, and the caliber of opposition, I think, in both the men's and the women's was actually really high, and it was something that was a really pleasant surprise. In Sweden and Germany for the men's team in the grand final, both of those teams going into that grand final hadn't actually dropped a map. So that was quite exciting. Sweden ended up winning that whole tournament 2-0. Plopsky, Bob XD were standouts on that team. And I guess to kind of talk about that event in general, I guess the first question I have for both you, going to open the floor up, is Sweden. You don't really expect too many big things from Swedish players at the moment. They've kind of been a little bit out of the spotlight, but did we kind of expect these guys to kind of perform and play well? There was notable teams in the men's tournament, right? There was Big Academy, basically, with Farven. There was Astralis Talent also competing. There was the Uzbekistan guys who were playing together on that lineup, looking really solid as well. I don't know if you caught any of it, if you guys did, because I know Pro League was kind of on at the same time. But I just want to get your thoughts on the tournament in general, and with it being a World Cup format, is that something you kind of want to see in the future? Like, could that be a conversation piece if we had maybe every 4 years, kind of like the Olympics or kind of like the World Cup we have in football? If everyone kind of rallied together and said, okay, we're going to pick the best players from each team, and there wasn't like an organizational cap on it, would that be something that the calendar wants to see, or would that be a little bit too much?
I guess what's already happened before in the past with this is that WESG was trying to do those World Cup sort of tournaments, and in some ways they were interesting, but it never felt like they were able to capture the prestige of what a World Cup's able to do for football. So I'm not necessarily sold on the idea that it can make a mark on the calendar. If you did, I don't think even doing it once every 4 years would help build prestige with it necessarily, because the game is in a state where it's so ever changing. You'd kind of want to just give those players from those countries as many chances as you can, because with how fleeting skill is and form is in Counter-Strike, like you would probably, it's kind of funny, you would probably 1 year, if you actually had to wait 4 years, you might miss a 3 year peak of a certain player that, and then you'd be like, why didn't he ever play in a World Cup? And it's like, oh yeah, because you're only good at Counter-Strike for 3 years. So sometimes. So I would be, I'd say a little bit less interest. I don't think you should wait. I think it should be an annual thing if you do it at all. To get to your original question with talking about regions though, and who I thought would do well just kind of by looking at the names, I thought that teams like Hungary would probably have done well. I think that Sweden would probably be a team that would do well. I kind of just look at any of the teams that would do well, and it's like, who has the most tier one pros, honestly. Like Team Romania itself seemed like it should have actually been pretty decent, given they have a couple guys from Nexus. But for Sweden, if you want to even wrap back to that idea, I think actually Sweden in a way could put together a 5 that is actually entirely better than this 5 without any of these 5 players. Like the 3 dudes from NIP, for example, couldn't play this because they were playing at ESL Pro League, but it would have been, I think they would have just stomped everybody, honestly. I feel like they would just, I feel like if it were just, you get Hampus and Rez and Brolin on that team, I don't know how they don't just run the gauntlet against every team. And I guess Sweden didn't even drop a single map, but they would have not dropped a map even harder, if you want to say that.
Yeah, and even like the Sweden team, it has basically a bunch of the players, or a couple of the players you would have known, right? Like the Jacquinhos, Plopskis, NTR. Like these are at least known names. I feel like Sweden have had this for a while, where there's always these teams just underneath that seem to do sort of just about okay at tier 2, and I think that's sort of what you needed at this tournament. They're pretty used to having these weird little mixed teams that just show up to events like this. So I guess that helped. I do think there's something fun about this, because Counter-Strike's becoming more and more international. So I feel like every now and then, I could imagine a world where we suddenly had 2 new, I don't know, rising German talents, or German's a bad example. Let's say Swedish talents or something, and they're playing on different teams, and we finally get to see them come together in a fun little mixed team. That would be fun if the players cared. And I also actually think this is not a bad time for other TOs to try and host tournaments, because Pro League group stages, they are like cool and people watch them, but people aren't really like going out of their way to watch a Pro League group stage. You know, it's sort of like you'll put it on, you'll catch a few matches. There's definitely room to have little tournaments like this if you want to mess with formats, or you want to have like fun events. I think there's a lot of space for it, especially because you've got the groups in Pro League where not every team is going to be at every group. So, you know, if you're not in the first week of Pro League, let's say you're in Group D, you'd maybe consider coming to events at this sort of time period. So I think that's the other interesting part. You know, experimenting with stuff like this, I think, is cool. And I mean, you can talk about this, B Dog, but from what I saw, the actual setup looked really sick for this event.
Yeah, no, it was, and it actually did feel like you were kind of attending sort of one of those spectacle events. Like it was outside the Palace of Culture. They put Counter-Strike like on the palace itself. There was so many different concerts going on as well. We obviously had the Philharmonic Orchestra to open up, and they played the Counter-Strike theme song, which you probably saw from Lucy's tweet. And that was pretty incredible. Then there was drone shows. There was Armin van Buren, who actually brought the Team Netherlands on stage when they won, which was a really cool experience for them. It felt more than just another one of these events. And it's interesting, we kind of posed the question about every 4 years. And you say in Maui, like, well, it would be good if they did it annually, just to the life cycle of players and the development of kind of their career paths. They are looking to do this every single year. I think the next one's going to be hosted in Saudi Arabia next year. So it'd be interesting to see how they've kind of left a very high benchmark. It'd be interesting to see how they next elevate it. It'd be interesting to see where they position it in the calendar, because I think you're right. If they are a little bit more in tune with when bigger tournaments are running, and if there's kind of a gap of maybe like a week and a half, or maybe coming off the back of a different event, then potentially there's a lot of scope for it. I think it's very interesting. Hawker, I want to throw a question back to you. And we've been talking about the fact that we said that Sweden have won, but if there was no restrictions, say this was a complete blank canvas, and you had kind of players from every single country that could compete, who, in your opinion, do you think is the strongest country to win if you could put all of these players together? I know Maui had an idea with Sweden being that bit better with the core of NIP, but can anyone beat that?
I mean, so I'm going to assume, if we're doing this, in my head, I'm going to say you're maybe going to allow like maximum 3 players from the same team. Like, we're not just bringing the whole heroic lineup, right? Because that's no
No.
fun, realistically.
No. We'll do core
So
three.
in that case, okay, yeah. In that case, the thing is, like, Russia always feels pretty strong, just because I'm thinking of Cloud9 right now. I actually don't. I feel like I'd have to think about this for a fair bit. Ooh. I don't know. Are there any obvious ones for you, Maui? Like straight away?
I would have instantly said Russia. I would
Yeah.
have instantly said Russia, and my other answer is not France.
Yeah, fair.
Poor Zaiwu. Poor Zaiwu.
I don't think there's really. I think Russia and Denmark would be far and away number 1 and 2. I don't really know, because you have your pick for Denmark for like what IGL you even take. Do you want to actually take Cadian, or do you want to take Snappy, and or even Hooksy for some? I don't think people are going to do that, but I think it would be probably Snappy, and then they would be like, okay, well, now you can have Device, and you can still have Blame F because he doesn't need to rifle, or he doesn't need to IGL, I mean, and then you just pick the couple best players from Heroic beyond that. Like if you had Snown, Snappy, Device, Blame F, and I want to say, let's just do Shush or Yabby, depending on what position you want more so. That team is disgusting. That team is just like way too good already. Russia would be a fun one, because you could do Axile, Shiro, Electronic, and if you don't even want to play like more than 3 from the same team, it gets a little bit trickier at that point, but
Donk.
I'm pretty. Yeah, you could get you could
Ooh,
get
true.
Dong. You
That's
could
a
get
VP player, surely.
yeah, you get VP players. Yeah, you'd get Fame and Flit
Yeah,
probably or
Flit,
something like
yeah.
that. Yeah. So, I don't know. I actually literally don't know what even would be the third best country beyond that.
Yeah, that's tough. That is actually
Maybe
tough.
maybe
Prob-
Sweden. Maybe
Probably
actually
Sweden,
Sweden, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it feels bad to not say Ukraine because you have Simple and
Yeah.
Bit already, and then but I don't really know who that fifth player would be necessarily. Like you could get SDY, Simple, Bit. I guess you could get DemQ, and it kind of depends at that point. Do you want Waro, who will have beef with Simple if they play on the same team, as we know, or are we gonna get Head Trick, who's probably going to be easier for Simple to play with? So I would probably give him Head Trick just because I don't want the two Waro and 2K and Simple to fight each other. Australia would be kind of weirdly decent, actually. I think Australia, JKS, Dexter, and then some of the Greyhound guys. I think that's actually not horrible. I think people would be like, oh yeah, Australia can be a top 8 country at this game. It's better than I think it almost might be better than America. Now that I'm looking at it.
Oh,
Dude,
wait,
America,
actually, hang on.
we don't even have good players anymore. We have a Canadian on Liquid, who's the best North Americans are Canadian right now with Twist and Naf. Like we don't
Canada
actually have...
might beat the USA.
Canada would be better than the USA.
Oh,
I'm almost
no.
sure of it.
Yeah.
I don't know who
Oh, no.
yeah, and you could get Stanislaw or Daps for that matter. Like
Have both.
Unless you get honorary Americans like Yakindar and,
Randy,
that's what you gotta hope
Yakindar
for.
Smith.
Yeah. Holzerk.
There you go.
Zolzerk,
As American as they come.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, Team Turkey, if you could just take everybody from one team, Eternal Fire is not horrible. It's not like what's funny is Eternal Fire itself, if you put all 5 of those players, that probably is better than Team Norway, for example. Even though you kind of like be like, oh wait, that's it takes you a second to come up with that one, but yeah. Okay. I think that's enough theory crafting for me.
Yeah.
All right, let's we could even add more in. Like imagine if one of the stipulations was like, okay, you had to bring a player that was like under 18, for example, then that kind of like it breaks the theory crafting out the window even more. I don't want to go into it because I know we're on a bit of a tight schedule. So we're going to move away from World Cup theory crafting and we're going to jump into something that has happened this week. Obviously, Pro League kicked off, and I would kind of want to get insights from both of you. Maui, I know you've watched a lot of Pro League. You've been co-streaming it pretty much every single day, and I'm anticipating you're going to do so for the remainder of the group stage. What were your, I guess, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Instead of a top 3, what were your top 2 key takeaways from this week of Pro League?
Yeah, my top 2 takeaways were that one, NIP is in disarray. That's the biggest storyline for me from Group A because I had NIP as a team that I thought was going to make it through this group. I wasn't going to say convincingly because I knew that they were going to lose to Vitality in that upper semis game, but if they got there, that is, which because as soon as they beat Astralis, I thought, oh, okay, sure. Like teams that win their first game in this format of Pro League have a pretty strong chance of making it. You're not guaranteed, but it does help your road quite a bit because then you have to win, I think, 1 less BO3 than teams that lose immediately. So there's something to it where you get a pretty nice little boost if you're able to do that. And I get okay. Actually, only that theory only works if you actually make it through the upper bracket. By the way, but I mean with NIP right now, I just so strongly dislike the inability that so many of these players seem to have to understand on a macro level what their teammates are doing. I like they are so consistently uncoordinated, and it almost feels like I'm watching tier 2 CS, but every player on their team can have a pop-off moment. It's like you have all this insane amounts of skill and potential round to round, but the reason people are like, oh, like I hear this a lot that NIP has a bunch of inconsistent stars, and I don't actually always think that it's their mechanics that fail them. It's that they don't have team level awareness of what's actually going to be coming next onto their screen, because I don't think everybody's communicating very well. I feel like they don't, like with Alexi B running this team, at one point it felt like they started to feel it out, but now it feels like they're back to square one with Hampus. And so NIP, I know they can bring it up over time, but if this team can even make, I'd say, the playoffs of any prestige level event for, I guess there aren't any prestige events for a while, but let's say they I don't even know if they can make top 4 at like an 8-team event if you're using all top 10 teams, basically. Like that's where I am with NIP right now. I I think they need a lot in terms of help, and it's not really just down to one person, and I don't think even one person is really shining above the rest. Like, people think that Head Trick, for example, is really like, save Head Trick, save Head Trick. It's like, I mean, Head Trick's not really willing them into these games at all either. Like, there's certain players where I want to save them. I want to save Frozen from Maus sometimes because he's willing his team into rounds. I don't really see Head Trick ever single-handedly winning rounds for NIP. He just finds good stats.
Damn. Yeah, I think there's the thing I always look at with this NIP lineup is who am I looking at and saying, all right, you're the player that's going to outmaneuver, outposition someone in one of these rounds. And I look down the list and I'm like, I don't really think of any of these players as super smart, like positional players. It's almost like they need someone like Crims even. Like Crims would be the sort of player where I'm like, I kind of know that Crims is going to make really good decisions and normally be very reliable. And I don't know if they have that on this team. And I think when you don't have that as a rifler, you almost naturally get some instability in how your team plays and the sort of results you're going to get. And yeah, I don't really know. Like on paper, the lineup looks like it's got really good names, but I think Maui's right. Like it just hasn't clicked for the longest time, and it just doesn't. It didn't look like it was clicking any better at this event. So I'm with Maui on that. There's something not quite right there, and that's even after they got the opening win against Astralis, and people were kind of excited. But I guess that's the NIP classic, isn't it?
Yeah. And just for a short, because you wanted 2 things.
Yeah.
The other crazy storyline about this one is, this format is a little bit fraudulent, the way that Movistar were able to get themselves to the playoffs by beating Greyhound and Gamer Legion only. So I don't want that to be my second storyline. That's like, oh, Movistar, a pleasant surprise. Or no, sorry, they beat Furia and Gamer Legion. My bad. But that to me is not. It's not the most impressive thing. So I'm not gonna go out and say like, oh, Movistar can surprise us. It's like, I don't know. Like, I think a lot of teams in Europe could beat those 2 teams just fine. The other thing for me is probably it's actually Gamer Legion not qualifying, because I think that's a bit of a bigger surprise to me that Gamer Legion 1 didn't beat Movistar in the game that could have gotten them to the playoffs, and 2, then they lose to Astralis, they barely scrape by NIP, and then they lose to Furia. And this team is the worst number 7 team ever. Like, why are they ranked number 7 on not only the HLTV rankings, but they're ranked number 7 on the ESL rankings too? So they're still getting invited to ESL events.
I genuinely thought you were going to say the Valve rankings for a second there, and I was going to be like, no one counts those, Maui.
Ends number 1.
No, yeah, okay. Gamer Legion's a weird one because I've watched a fair bit of them, I think. I cast them a bit at Cologne and at Gamers 8. And, like, you actually look at the teams they beat at these events. It's like their biggest win at Cologne was Fnatic, I guess. And Fnatic were a new lineup. And then they scraped a win against Apex at Gamers 8 that looked super, like, that game was just so all over the place. And then they lost against Heroic. I guess because they played Cloud9 close, that's the one where you can look at and say, oh, well, they look promising. But that's Cloud9 with Buster, which is a whole different thing. Cloud9's a whole new lineup. Yeah, I felt like for the longest time, Gamer Legion are this team where I look at them and I'm like, I don't get why you're good. What are you good at? Because they were getting results and they were doing all right at tournaments. But the more I watch them, I think Nealon's fine as an in-game leader, but I don't think he's great. I actually think their macro sometimes has looked a little dodgy. And then some of the players on this team, dude, if you watch Isaac play, I don't understand sometimes how this guy gets these crazy carry games, because I don't think his mechanics look good. He just has this like weird, awkward movement where he seems to catch people off guard. And fair play to him, it works sometimes. But especially in that decider series against Furia, I think the first map, Isaac was really bad, and he will have some really bad maps sometimes. And then just the overall firepower on this team just looks so weak. Like it just doesn't look like it should be good enough really to be an actual good team. And so yeah, they were doing well initially, but this almost feels like this is more where we expected Gamer Legion to be at when the changes were first made, and we were pleasantly surprised for a bit. But now it's kind of looking like this is more what I expected them to be honest.
Okay. All right. Well, we said a lot of things here, so I'm gonna try and like break each one down, and like we're gonna recap these 2 points that I'm now kind of breaking down into like 6. So I guess Maui, coming to you first. We spoke about NIP, and you just said that their team play is just a little bit off. For me personally, is that you can't blame one player, you can't blame them, you can't put individual like negativity on them because it's not fair. Is this a structure thing? Is this maybe a coaching slash analyst thing? Or is it something else? Like how would you go about trying to reinvent NIP into the next event? What needs to change here in your opinion?
If I were if I had a semi limited budget but could make some cool changes, what I would do with NIP is I would actually remove config and I would remove head trick and I would keep this trio Swedish core. And what I would try to do from that is a little bit along the lines of what Haka said. You could go for someone like Crims. You could actually even pick up someone like Isaac. And then you would get the best Swedish player right now and Knock. That's Knock. If you get Knock instead and you all start speaking Swedish again, I think the cohesion problems vanish because Brolin has been noticeably worse, and statistically, he has been worse when he plays with English speaking rosters. So you could get Brolin back up to the form that you would expect, and then you could get probably a little bit more output and ease from, or like just the ease of teamwork from people like Rez, Hampus, Crims, Knock. Like if this team came back into the fray as that lineup, I'd be kind of hyped for them. I don't think that they're necessarily a championship contending roster, but I think that the boost that they would get in teamwork from speaking everybody's native tongue, and then the fact that you would probably like the 1-for-1 there with Crims or Isaac for that matter for config does seem like a downgrade in terms of firepower, but I think that in terms of roles, it's actually incredibly beneficial because you would have Crims or Isaac on kind of these anchor positions, these kind of just glue guy spots, the ones where you just have to make sure that you don't fail at your job because then your whole system's going to blow up. But Config's kind of just such a wild card, and he has proven to us now verifiably that this year for Config, he's not an all-star. He's not some superstar that's worth taking the risk on his ups and downs and his turbulence. Like the way that he has been so inconsistent for them, like I don't think that like the potential at this point merits the inconsistency. So I would just make this team a lot more rigid. I would make this team more Swedish, and I think that one, you would be better. You would just be a better team. And two, you would actually bring some of your fans back who at this point don't really know what's going on with this NIP roster. But if you get Crims and you have Rez, at least some people have a little bit of that, like, oh, hey, this is some of the older guys. Not that Rez still kind of feels new in our eyes compared to the super legacy players, but people remember him from his 2017 performance, for example. So that would do a lot of good for NIP. And I personally would love to see them speak Swedish again.
God damn, he's going full PR mode. I can imagine 6 months from now, Maui hired by NIP to be the brand ambassador.
Well, I gave them the whole blueprint, so why would they even hire me? In fact, there's no reason for them to pay me. They could just copy me.
It's for the marketing. We need Maui there saying make NIP Swedish again. Okay, the fans want the Swedish players back. I can see it. It does make
I
sense
like
though.
it.
I actually think because like I think you kind of forget how good Brolan was. Like he was a top 20 player for 2 years in 2019, 2020, according to HLTV. So like I kind of agree with you that Brolan feels like the player that I'm most confused by, and surely you're right. Like a language thing would make sense as to why he's struggling. So I don't hate it. I just also think you do need a somewhat drastic shift because I don't see this lineup. It depends what you want from NIP, but I don't see this lineup doing much of anything. Kind of like you said, I don't really see them making playoffs that often, to be honest.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me, two things, is that when Brolan left Fnatic and went to NIP, he literally went there to speak Swedish, and then they went international. And I kind of agree with what you're saying. I feel like they've kind of lost their identity a little bit because NIP were this powerhouse. They were the team that was competing for championships consistently, and I feel like they've lost their way a little bit. Obviously, went international to try and do that, but it hasn't really worked out. So maybe you do end up going back to your roots. Hawker, I want to talk about one thing we haven't mentioned yet, and I want to kind of get your insight into Furia and K Serato just popping off. And obviously, he was a massive catalyst for why Furia were able to make it through the playoffs this time. But why is that happening on the server? What is going on with the rest of the team that is requiring K Serato to go above and beyond and almost play like two players in the server?
Yeah, it is kind of wild that I mean we talked about players you would want to save earlier. I mean Keserato is right up there for Furia for the longest time. I'm glad he's back because he had one or two events that were a bit shakier, but personal circumstances I think made a lot of sense. We kind of expected he would get back to this level. I think Furia started off like pretty poorly at this event, and I was really worried. And that was the series against Movistar, right, where Keserato literally tried the hardest carry performance of all time, pretty much, and they still just lost the series 2-0. And you're sitting there like, oh my god, is this just going to be K Serato depression era again? I think I jokingly tweeted that on Maui's stream it was confirmed he was taking English lessons after that loss because it was so sad. But they they're in a weird position. Like I still don't think Furia looked great at this event. They still just like weirdly the coordination doesn't really look there, but I guess maybe that's to be a bit expected when you've made a fairly drastic change, bringing in Fallen. It, it it just doesn't scream like confidence to me, especially because I feel like that Game Allegiant game, the decider game, I still feel like that was like fairly scrappy Counter Strike, which is fine. Sometimes you need to play like that, but it more to me felt like Game Allegiant collapsed than Furia just dominated. I think they looked like they had a bit more of an idea as to what they were doing in general. And for what it's worth, Art actually played pretty well at this event, numbers wise. So that's at least promising. Hopefully, that can be something that continues because they'll probably need it. I don't think Fallen's going to be a big fragger, but I still don't really. I don't see the direction of the team still personally. Like I think you would normally expect them to make it through a Pro League group stage just with the names, and I feel like they kind of just made it through with the names and with the players performing. And maybe it looked a little better, but still not good enough, at least in my eyes.
Yeah, no, that's reasonable. I think the biggest conversation piece, you mentioned it, and something I want to throw to Maui before we move on to Group B is Fallen and Art in the same team. Is it ever really going to work out longer term, or is this just kind of a transition period for Furia?
Uh, it's an interesting angle because what I what I think actually needs to change with Furia is I actually just think they need one other good anchor, and that could be with Art and Fallen still on the same team. I actually am not as I'm not as against it as the rest of the community is. I think it can work, but you can't have your other anchor player be Cello. Cello's just not a natural anchor. He has already significantly dropped off as an individual from what he was doing with Imperial, where he got to be a more active rifler when he was playing with them. And so when I see Cello being the B anchor on Mirage, and when I see Cello being the B anchor on Overpass, I just know that it's never gonna lead to sustained success, because with Furia already, he has only had a single event so far with an above 1.0 kill death ratio, and it's just these ESL Pro League groups. When you look at what he was doing with Imperial, and some of the events sure aren't to the same caliber as what he's playing now with Furia, but very frequently he's popping off for them. And that was because he had a completely different role. And it was almost one of those things where, to me, if I were just the GM of Furia and I wanted to save money, I actually probably just wouldn't have picked up Cello. I actually just would have kept Drop instead of Cello. And if you want to make that like that later move, you can, and you could see, is this Art Fallen thing going to work out? And we don't have to guess necessarily. But if you really wanted Cello for some reason, you're like, we got to get this guy. He's the next big thing out of Brazil. Then you drop Art, you keep Drop in his anchor positions, you put Cello into all of Art's positions, and I think the team's better also. I think there was two ways you could have done this to make this team better, given that, and you would have had to spend no more money than you would have already spent. So that's to me, like, I feel like Furia made a mistake here by just neutering a player who many of us were excited about on Imperial. Like, he looked like the best player on that roster a lot of the time. So this is just an awkward way to use him.
Yeah, I'm actually with you because I was just instinctually, I was thinking Cello still looks pretty good on T side, actually. Like, he'll have some rounds where he actually is quite active and you'll see him get like some early round kills. So I just looked up the numbers quickly. Even at Pro League here, he had a 1.21 rating on T side. It's his CT side numbers that are down there, 0.92 on CT.
Yeah.
So that actually, I think, is a really good way of putting it. Like, he does feel like quite a similar player to Art, where he wants to be pretty active. And yeah, it's a shame because I really do see the glimpses of Cello. Like, I see what they saw in him to bring him to this team, but I think you're right. I don't think the roles make sense. And I just hope it's not another one of these scenarios where Furia bring in a player, they don't really give him quite the right roles. Because even with Drop, I would agree with you that Drop, I think he was falling off a bit towards the end of Furia, but I don't think it was really because of him. It kind of felt like the team structure as a whole just looked so bad that, of course, your anchors are going to struggle. And we kind of saw that. And even when Drop was first brought onto the team, he actually had a knack of catching players out sometimes and just playing like just good in those anchor roles, like doing well enough to just catch people off guard. So I really do think Drop was one that they could have considered keeping as long as they could have got his confidence back. But I think you're right. Like, Cello, definitely potential there, just maybe not the right roles for now. And I don't know. I always hate when you bring a player into like the top level team in your region and you just give him different roles, because it almost just feels like that never works. That so rarely works out for those players. So yeah, we'll wait and see on Furia, but not feeling great right now. I think better, but still not great.
Yeah, I feel like when you bring a player in and you change up their roles completely, and they're very polarizing to what they were originally in, you're kind of like cutting off your nose to spite your face, sort of thing. So it's very interesting. It's cool that we were able to get like a real time stat check on that as well. So thank you for doing that as well. I want to move on to Group B. I'm conscious of time. Originally in the notes, we were going to rank these teams 1 to 8. I don't want to do that because I feel like this group, there's some interesting takes that can be made. I feel like I want to go to each of you and I want to pick maybe one team that will be like a surprise factor that has the potential to try and make it through in towards playoffs. Maui, I wouldn't pick Big because I think Big are actually like a solid choice, and I want to get your opinion just on them and how they're doing a little bit later on. So we'll start. Hawker, we'll go with you first. I'll weigh in at the end because I need to actually think about this because now I've just made this question up. So, in your opinion, who's a team that you wouldn't necessarily consider to make it through the group stage, but you think can?
I feel like this group is a tough one for that because, okay, you probably have 5 teams that I could genuinely consider going through. It's probably
Yeah.
Heroic, Big, Monty, Mouse, Ents. I will say, maybe I'm going to switch it slightly. I think a team that might do a little better than people expect will be Mouse. I actually think online recently they've been looking a bit better. I still think Frozen is just fantastic. I guess exceeding expectations for Maus though is kind of tough here because will they beat Ents or Heroic? I mean, it's not impossible when you're in a group stage, but I don't think it's maybe that likely. But I do still believe in Shuhei. I think he will come good, and I also just feel like for some reason recently, I don't know why Exertion just hasn't been that good, and I'm waiting for that to change because I've seen this guy be incredible. I've seen this guy solo carry a map against FaZe, so clearly he's got what it takes individually. I don't know exactly how I feel about Yimpat either. Like, I'm wondering if it's just going to take him time to adapt to LAN because he's still doing all right online, but I think they're in that adjustment process. So I think Maus will. I feel like people think Maus are kind of not really that good right now and might even struggle to make it through. That's kind of the community feeling I get. But I think they'll be pretty solid enough here. And to be fair, they have that easy side of the bracket, so I think they should be pretty good.
I mean, I think you outlined who's going to make it already. I guess I can't really say in good faith that any of the other 3 teams in Rooster, MIBR, or EG are going to do anything to impress us. I would say it's an easy choice, but MIBR is going to do better than the other 2. But it also kind of comes down to, do they get matched up against bad teams? And I think that given that they're probably going to lose their first one, they're both them and EG, they'll probably at least make the lower semis of that second stage, not the last chance. I hate talking about these groups. I mean, as in the way it breaks down, it's like they're gonna fall down to the lower bracket, but not the last chance stage. Like, I mean, they're gonna they have
weird.
Yeah.
On stream, they call it the mid bracket and then
the
the lower
bracket. Yeah,
and
okay.
I'm like,
the mid
okay,
bracket.
there's a mid bracket now. Cool.
The mid bracket. They're so mid. Sure. Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna talk about big later, they would have probably been the team I would have picked. I guess Monty are there with them, but I think that Monty, if I had to do a logical ranking, Monty would be my team that squeaks through in 4th place in this group.
Ooh, I think maybe the question is then, out of the 5 that we think are going to be in contention, who doesn't make it? That is the question.
Yeah.
Well,
that's a better
either
question.
Big or Monty, I think.
Yeah, I would say so. I would lean towards Big not making it.
So would I.
It's tough. Okay, so Monty are a weird one because I actually think strategically and on a macro level, Monty play pretty damn well right now. SDY was saying this when they made the change, and I actually fully buy into it. My question is genuinely, Bro played really weirdly well at Cologne, and he had a few rounds where I look at them and I'm like, it's cool that you've done that, but you're not going to consistently win a 1v3 with a 5-7 against a full gun round where they could just kind of like all line up perfectly for you. Like, he had so many of these low buy rounds where he comes through with big plays. I don't see that happening consistently. And the overall firepower on Monty, I think it looks like okay. But in theory, I look at Big and I would say Big should have more. It's just a question of whether it comes through. And I guess the problem is also, like, Big have been playing online recently and been doing pretty well, actually. Like, they did beat Monty, but we haven't really seen them play with the proper lineup on a LAN stage with Mantu. So Big are probably the question mark for me, because I kind of know that Monty, I think, are pretty decent. I think they play pretty good strategic CS. They love to play into the late round. Warro's actually been playing better recently on LAN, which I'm happy is finally happening. But Big is the one where they could be really good. They could be bad. I don't know.
I want to jump in quickly if I can, because I've watched a lot of Monte online recently, and their structure actually has been looking really shaky against tier 2 teams, and it hasn't really been the Monte of old, which obviously Sunday Young wanted to kind of turn away from, and they wanted to add a lot more macro decision making, I think. But they haven't really kept their identity. I think they're trying to shift and mold it into something a little bit different. And I think that's actually been kind of catching them off guard. And when they play these faster rounds, when they actually have the confidence to go, okay, we can just out aim these guys, that's where they shine a lot more, especially in the online space. But for the last couple of weeks, they've been a little bit rocky. They've been losing series that you kind of look at and you think, well, why have you been losing that? Especially against Space. I think that was a couple of weeks ago. They lost to
Who the
Furia and
hell is Space? I see that right now.
Exactly.
Who is this team?
So that's the Ex Hydra guys, and they think they've got Trunic, who I think was on Nine Pandas ages ago. I don't know too much about them apart
Jesus
from
Christ.
Some
uh,
niche knowledge.
I don't know
yeah.
any of these people.
I don't know too much about them, but I know that Space is an organization that's picked them up really recently. I know that Fozel's a really good player. From like the tier 2 tier 3 space, but I haven't actually had too much of an opportunity to watch them. But the point is, you're saying, who the hell are these guys? Well, you'd expect Monte to beat them, and they haven't. So
Hmm.
that's kind of my takeaway. And when I've been watching Monte, especially versus Eternal Fire, for example, I know those two teams are going to butt heads a lot. They've kind of created a little bit of a rivalry. They've been playing each other quite a lot in these online tournaments. And some of the rounds don't look that structured. And it kind of goes against what SDY was saying. And that's where I worry
Hmm.
about how they're going to perform, especially against upper echelon teams in a LAN environment. But to kind of go against your point, Hawker, Bro's numbers have actually been doing pretty well. Like, he's been actually pretty solid. He's been making, when you watch him, he plays the round out, not only to not die, and like you kind of have this thing where players go into rosters and they play a little bit more timid because they don't want to be the reason that you lose the round or give open the man advantage. But his positioning, especially on CT side, has been really impressive to me. So I don't think Bro is actually, maybe that he's not a problem, but to kind of give it CS terms, he's not the problem, sort of thing. It's interesting though. I don't know how they're going to go from the online back to LAN again.
Yeah, that's the one thing that gives me hope is like I could imagine a world where they're just playing a little less disciplined online. And
Yeah.
I know SDY especially has talked about how, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, he's low-key just constantly been not throwing shade at Navi, but sort of throwing shade at Navi, and basically saying that he feels like on Monty, all the players actually believe in each other, and he feels like it's much more of a team, and that they look at each other and they all are on the same page and they're all trying to support each other. Whereas he said maybe he didn't have that in the past. And it seems like that worked really well for them when they've come to LAN. And it's also probably easier to play that more methodical style on LAN. Like, you know what it's like. Sometimes players go online and genuinely, even if it's an official, they maybe do for whatever reason, because they're playing at home, they just fall back into habits slightly and they're not 100% thinking, let's play till 20 seconds left. Maybe they make more risks. Maybe they're just trying out new stuff online. Who knows? It's hard to know. But based on what I've seen from Monty, like at Cologne, I was impressed enough where I think they will be pretty solid still here.
Yeah, very reasonable. Okay. I want to talk about Maus because you've already mentioned them, Hawker, but Maui specifically, you said earlier you want to save Frozen. So I just kind of want to get your takes on Maus and kind of where they're at right now in their development.
So I see that Maus have played in some online events. I mean, the main thing being that Thunderpick World Championship qualifier, I suppose,
Yeah.
where they were able to win the whole thing. And for me with Maus, I guess for a very broad perspective, I guess I haven't really seen Yimpat do anything on LAN, which is kind of, I think Haka said something about that earlier. When he was playing with NXT, it did seem like he was a pretty skillful but like fairly passive player in my eyes. And when I've seen him at the events that like I've covered, I just really haven't seen, like, it just almost feels like a more mistake prone JDC. Like it was bad. It was bad what he did at Cologne, for example. Like I felt like, oh god, like are they going with a guy that's going to be higher variance when this should just be kind of an upgrade? So I don't, with their development with Maus, I think this is a good tournament for them to prove that using the time that they've had since Cologne playing the Thunderpick event has actually amounted to something. And so that's why when you look at Maus going into this event, I it's kind of almost to me unfortunate that they're going to play ENCE in the second matchup, because in some ways I actually feel like if they played Heroic, who aren't in their best form, there's a chance for me that Mao's just come top 2 in this group. But because they're going to play ENCE, I think that it's very likely that Mao's are going to end up being the third place team in this group. And it would be flat out disastrous if they don't qualify for playoffs. Like, that would make you have to really rethink what's going on. Probably, like, I would immediately just point the finger at like Yimpat. Like, I'm gonna assume that it's gonna be a problem on his end, because I wouldn't think that, like, Frozen to me is a top 5 rifler this year. Shuhei has already proven himself now with 2 rosters, with the NXT roster and Gamer Legion. Torji's having a bit of a resurgence. You could probably start calling for his head at some point, but based off of what he did at Cologne, I would probably give him a pass for some time now. And with Exertion, that's another concern, because he was very good when he was playing with Dexter. He hasn't been quite the same player under Shuhei, which is very strange, because he was very good under Shuhei before, back with the NXT team. And so the 2 people I would probably put the microscope on first would be Yimpat and then Exertion. And I would leave the other 3 for now. But as time goes on, I don't think you really need to blow anything up yet. But I just think that if you're Maus and we're talking about progression, it's top 3 should be a minimum here.
Yeah, it is a weird position where, like you said, in terms of like career trajectories, Frozen is at a point where I want him to be competing for trophies, and everyone else on this team, I wouldn't say in their career is at that point yet. You know, Shuhei's still sort of developing, looks like the in-game leader for the future, but not for right now. Torji seems like he's maybe slightly improving, but he has just constantly felt like that sort of gatekeeper AWP where he'll do well enough or okay at this level, but I never see him breaking through. Exertion maybe has shown us glimpses. I have been really impressed by him on occasional maps, but it is also a scenario where he plays this aggressive entry role. Sometimes if you have a really good feel for that, it just looks really good when you have a really good game. It was interesting when Exertion's had some of his best games. I feel like it's almost come from like beating the CT utility and just having this really tight timing window where he goes straight in, almost when top level teams wouldn't expect you to, in a weird way. So I'll be interested to see if Shuhei tries to use him like that, or if it's more of a controlled structure. And then, like you said, Yimpat's still developing. So yeah, it really is unfortunate for Frozen, especially because for the longest time we keep calling Frozen the young veteran, because he's literally 21 and it feels like he's been around forever. It's so crazy. So, I mean, I guess maybe the upside is hopefully he can still have a long career. But I think overall, you're right. Like this, unfortunately, overall, it feels like a roster that's developing, despite Frozen being a genuinely top caliber rifler and also doing so in a role that's really hard. Like there's almost no one that's doing Frozen's role as well as him. I don't think that there's maybe 2 or 3 players in the world that are sort of on Frozen's level. So it's a bit of a shame to have him in a sort of middle of the pack tier 1 team.
Yeah, so this is the proving grounds for Maus. That they need to make playoffs, and they need to make playoffs comfortably. It can't be like a scrape through. That's the general consensus. All right, I don't mind it. Hawker, I want to come to you very quickly. I want to talk about Heroic and kind of what is happening with them, because it feels like they've been struggling a little bit, and I don't think personally, I don't think it's because of their team, their individuals at all. I think maybe could it be a factor that they're a little bit jaded by the fact that they've been able to make it so close to the top but not quite get there? And are they a little bit jaded because of the amount of tournaments there are in the calendar? Where do you kind of lean on this side of Heroic? And obviously we expect them to get through this group stage. That's not the question, but it's like, are we expecting a more dominant Heroic here at the group stages? I feel like it's necessary for them.
Yeah, it was weird at Cologne because Heroic came out and gave us the biggest baloney of all time, where they said, "Oh, we're trying to change our style and play, a little more loose sometimes, it's so that we can play against these underdog teams." And I'm sitting here like, Heroic, your whole thing was that you never lost against underdog teams with your style that you used to play because they really struggled against it. So this is just cap. Let's start with that. That's just complete lies. I think the follow up is that I just feel as though I mean, either they are actively trying to play looser, and I don't think that suits them as well, or that their team play just isn't quite as good and they don't feel as comfortable with it. I think that's really mainly what it comes down to. And then also, I don't really have specific reasons why this is happening, but Yabi's not playing anywhere near as well as he was previously. And so you're kind of missing a bit of that more star power that you used to have alongside Stown. So, yeah, just a slightly worse version of Heroic. I still think they'll do very well in this group, but no one really sees them as a team, I don't think, that are suddenly going to come out of nowhere and be the best team in the world right now. I don't see a path to that, at least, especially with some of the improvements other teams have made.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I guess like I don't think we need to dwell on that for too long. What I want to do is I want to just hand Maui the microphone, and I'm gonna say, "Big clan, I'm gonna let you just have the floor." So I talk to me about Big because it is your favorite team.
Um, Big for the record, Big are no longer my favorite team. They
Okay.
Crimbo is one of my favorite players, but I have given up on the big hype train, and that is due in part to the fact that they're just kind of been trying to do too much right now. I feel like they're trying to incorporate the youngsters in Process and Sin, and the fact that they're switching tabs and off IGL, like they're splitting IGL duties between him and Sin, and then Montu is making the team speak English again. Like this team to me has so many different storylines, all of which prove negative, except for Crimbo being for me one for the future. And so when I look at Big here, I definitely don't. I mean, I haven't really seen everything they've done online either, but when I was watching, I watched them play. I think I watched them play one online thing. God, I'm trying to like look through these results. I watched them play. Maybe it was just this thing for his bait. Actually, yeah, I think it was the sit. No, it wasn't. It might have been the thing versus bait in this open qualifier. I don't know. They were playing some qualifier. I felt like when I was watching the qualifier though with Big, it doesn't seem like the way that they used to stage rounds really nicely doesn't seem like it's coming about in the same way, and it feels like there's like I feel like Big don't. I'll say this. The reason they really aren't my favorite team anymore is because they don't play that staging style, which I really liked before, where I was like looking through every part of the round with Big, and I was like, this to me is such a almost like A+ way to do it. They don't always have the A+ players, but I always felt like their methods were very well ironed out, and I felt like they were very systematically approaching every single situation if they could. And I don't necessarily think that's how they go about things anymore. And they also aren't competing on stages that I'm watching close enough nowadays that I'm not getting to see them as much anymore. So, a couple of reasons that I haven't really been holding them in as high esteem. But I will say that I think over time this can bear some fruit, but it's in a weird way for me. It's almost a shame that Big are a partner team, because I feel like they should be doing this in a circuit that's not always on the biggest stages. And for example, the fact that they have the blast spot is like, that feels like it's for usually such elite teams, barring EG and them and OG, I guess, but every other team is nearing elite when we look at those rosters. And Big have kind of slipped down from a team that could consistently pull off upset wins versus the top teams in the world, and now I am shocked if they're able to take down a top 25 team. That's why for me, I would put Monty above Big in this group as that fourth team to make it through. But I still just kind of follow Crimbo as much as I can, because I think that he did a lot of limit testing when he was first on Big, and he's kind of consolidated his game to the point where I think he makes a lot of great moves. He still takes some pretty awkward risks at times, but I've also seen him take I've seen him make plays that I thought were pretty risky objectively, and then they pay off for him and his team. So there's something to him and the way that he approaches the game that gets me really excited, because it feels like he's always trying to think about the macro picture, and he's always drawing a radar of where he thinks the opponents are in his head, to a degree that he'll make risky plays predicated on the fact that he believes in his macro understanding of the situation so well.
Yeah, that's the one thing that's great, is that like Crimbo genuinely looks maybe not elite. Elite's not quite right, but in like late round scenarios, Crimbo is very good, and that's clear. And he's still so new. But this is almost the thing with Big, where I kind of hate seeing your best player be this really good late round player, because I would say it's similar in Liquid right now, where Naf is clearly their best player, and so many rounds I sit there and Naf just doesn't get given the opportunities that he needs to get to be his best. And unfortunately, I feel like we could see that a fair bit from Crimbo. Like maybe he'll win the occasional crazy 1-on-3 round, but you can't just put him in those positions and assume he's going to win a lot of them. And I think it's not like he's only a clutch player, Crimbo. Obviously, there's more to his game than that. But if you could get Crimbo into late rounds that are winnable more often, I think more often than not, he's going to beat out the opposing players in those positions. So it is a bit of a shame, but I just don't know if they have enough else firepower-wise. As you said, just a couple of newer players coming into the mix. And yeah, I mean, going English for Mantu is... I'm trying to think of a good analogy for that, because it just feels so weird. It's like, I mean, I can think of analogies, but I don't know if I want to use them. But, I guess it's like moving across the country for a girlfriend that you realize you don't even like that much. It's like, did you need to do that? I don't know.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, that's a good one. Maui, is there any team that you look at the moment and you can kind of see resemblances through that old style that Big had, where they're systematically setting up rounds piece by piece? Is there any team in the space at the moment that you could like and like draw a parallel to?
It's a good question. I thought Apex would be that team after what they did at the major. I haven't really seen it happen post losing JL and getting Satsunito in. Nine, when they're on their game, can do it. That's why I like Nine a lot. Yeah, I don't really know if there's anybody else that I would really relate to them. I mean, you see glimpses of it in certain teams like ENCE, but they end up doing a lot that's a little bit like they activate their stars too, and they don't have to do it as much. I guess maybe if I'm trying to think of a team in the top 15, VP sometimes, but they do it in such like the way that they've outlined to go through situations is much more cautious than what Big did, where Big would just trust their utility so much, then they would just, and it would be good. It would be good utility. Whereas VP, they have a methodical approach, but it's in such a different fashion. So yeah, I guess Nine are carrying the torch for that for me right now.
I like the Nine shout, but it's also like, it also makes Nine so frustrating, because I would say Big probably had just good enough players back in the day. Nine's players are like not quite good enough. So you watch their rounds and you're like, guys, you did so well. And then you just whiffed so hard. Why? Just get a bit better, please.
Okay. For our last segment, what we're going to do is we're going to do rapid fire, like yes or no. So I'm going to say potentially some outrageous statements, and you basically just have to come to the consensus of yes or no. You can't say anything else. It has to be yes or no. Okay, just I thought it'd be a bit fun. All right, so this is for specifically this group on this week, and we'll start off with maybe an easy one, but it could be a little bit controversial. ENCE is the best team in Group B.
Yes.
Yeah, I also agree. Okay. MIBR best of the worst in Group B.
Yes.
I mean, if if we're counting the top 5, then yeah.
Evil Geniuses will make a lower bracket run.
No.
I mean, they might make like a limp through one game. But
a lower bracket run beating Rooster, and that's it.
Exactly.
Okay. In the opening round, Big will beat Monte.
I'm going to say the opposite to Maui on this one.
No.
Yes. I can see it. Listen,
Okay.
Big have been playing well online lately. Okay, they're going to come in first game. Monty aren't ready. Monty, they don't know what they've been doing. They've been, and Brandon told us they've been playing this weird style of CS.
Are you casting
take a
that?
minute to figure it out. I should actually check. I don't think so. I think that's on the
no.
mainstream.
Oh yeah.
No, I've got a Heroic Rooster, the game that you should all tune into.
I'm not watching that.
I'll tell you, for Group A, I'm the Orcs expert. I could tell you a lot about the Orcs.
I didn't watch a
Alright.
single game of theirs.
All right. Okay. Because you said that now, Hawker, give us your best Orcs fact.
Well, the classic is that they called themselves Orcs because of an HLTV thread where one of their players got called an Orc, and they just decided to own it. So they called themselves Orcs, and now they're Orcs. That was genuinely the
Nice.
reason why they came up with the team name.
Okay. Yeah, I don't mind it.
Yeah.
I like that they're owning it, right? They're embracing
Exactly.
like it's not really a meme, but like they're just embracing it.
Yeah.
I guess Maui, you like putting hot takes on Twitter. Some perceive it to be a hot take. You got any hot takes for Group B?
Yeah, Frozen's the best player in this group, for sure.
Will he be the highest rated player in Group B, or who do you think will be?
The only reason he won't be is because Ents are just gonna clean up. So either Nerds or Sunpius will probably top it because they're just gonna win more. And Frozen has the chance to be the highest rated player, but with actually, you know what? Honestly, now that I think about it, Sound's gonna be the highest rated player. I don't think he's the best player in the group, but you get to farm Rooster, you get to farm Big or Monty, and then you might lose to Ents, but you'll still put up a good fight. And so Stown will have 2 games of just pure domination. So I'll say Stown's the highest rated player, but Frozen's the best player in this group overall.
Okay.
Not bad.
Are Rooster going to win a series?
No.
No.
Hell no.
No, not even against EG.
No,
Sadly.
I got EG for sure.
No love for Rooster. Okay. Automatic will have a good event.
I don't know if I consider a
I ca-
0.98 rating a good event. So
I have to say no because I actually think Automatic could be on a way better team and be doing all right. Like,
If you
he's
could
never
put
been the
Automatic
problem.
anywhere, where would you put him?
Liquid.
Screw it, Liquid. Yeah, actually, why not?
Over
Liquid
who?
for
Automatic
Rainwaker.
for Rainwaker.
Liquid
That's so
for
free.
Rainwaker is such a
Yeah.
huge win.
That's
so good.
free.
All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, we're getting a little silly and goofy with it now. So I think that's probably the perfect time to kind of wrap things up. We've spoken about IESF and the potential need for a World Cup. We've spoken about Group A and how everyone performed. We've looked ahead to Group B. I'm going to come to each of you. I'll start with you, Hawker. What's obviously you're casting Pro League. Got that over the next couple of days. You got any closing thoughts? Like what's kind of your take on everything, and what's one thing people should look out for?
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, excited. I'll be on B stream the entire time of the Pro League. So, occasionally we get okay games there. So come check them out if you want to. Maybe not Heroic Rooster, but we have fun. We have fun. We do have fun. And that's the main thing, of course.
Mao's MIVR is not a bad B stream game that you
Yeah,
got.
that's
No,
actually
good.
That's
That's a
I'm
good
actually
game,
glad
yeah.
Yeah.
low-key, we actually got the better game
I
there,
would
which
rather watch
happens
that
sometimes.
over EGNs for sure.
I know, right? So,
Yeah.
actually a decent game. Yeah, and in general, things to watch out for. I mean, in this group, I feel like I've got to continue to ride the Monty train. I think they're going to surprise people again. I think they're going to do it. My boy Waro, my boy SDY, they're coming through. So watch out for them. You're going to be surprised. You know what? They're going to play Heroic close. That's the least bold prediction ever. But they're going to
You
play
put
Heroic
Big.
close.
You said Big's gonna win.
You
said-
did
Well,
say Big's gonna
listen,
win.
who's keeping track, honestly, at this point? Who's keeping track?
All right. Okay.
Okay, sure. Maui, look, it's been fantastic having you on. Obviously, you're co-streaming throughout Pro League, so we're gonna give you a chance to plug And also, one thing you're looking out for, it doesn't have to just be in Pro League, but one thing you're kind of keeping your eye on in the CS landscape.
Yeah, so I mean, first off, I'm obviously co-streaming on Twitch TV/Mauisnake for the entirety of this. The co-streams have been going incredibly well in terms of just the chat reactions and everything like that. So make sure if anybody's listening, get in on the fun on those. And for the CS landscape, what I am looking at, I mean, the biggest storyline for me by far in all of Tier 1 CS is Cloud9, and seeing when this team is going to put it together, because I have no doubt they will. I just want to know when and how hard they're going to hit once they do. So that's it for me. I want to see Axile put up monster numbers again, because it feels like he's slowly fallen off. And that's not what I want from a guy that I was claiming 6 months ago.
No, that's fair enough. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening and tuning in. This has been another episode of the Pinnacle Stack, and we'll see you next time for the next episode.